20. Black bands with tragic endings you never heard of. What if we told you that some of the greatest black bands in music history ended not with a bang, but with betrayal, tragedy, and heartbreaking silence? From mysterious deaths to industry sabotage, these are the stories the spotlight never showed you. They gave us timeless hits, but behind the fame was pain the world chose to ignore. In this video, we uncover the shocking downfalls of 20 legendary black bands you've probably never heard the full truth about. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because at Legends of Black Excellence, the legacy is deeper than the sound. The Bar-Kays. In the mid-1960s, the Bar-Kays burst out of Memphis, Tennessee, not just as another soul group, but as a high-energy instrumental band electrifying the Southern funk scene. Initially formed by students from Booker T. Washington High School, the original lineup included Ben Cauley, trumpet; James Alexander, bass; Ronnie Caldwell, organ; Phelan Jones, saxophone; Carl Cunningham, drums; and Jimmy King, guitar. Their undeniable chemistry caught the attention of the legendary Stax Records, where they soon became the go-to backing band for top-tier artists, including a fast-rising star named Otis Redding. The band's breakout came with the release of Soul Finger in 1967. This infectious horn-driven anthem climbed to number 17 on the Billboard Hot 100 and showcased a bold, youthful edge that stood apart from other instrumental groups of the era. With their flashy style, synchronized movements, and explosive performances, the Bar-Kays were poised to dominate the national funk landscape. But on December 10, 1967, tragedy struck. Otis Redding and the Bar-Kays were en route to a concert in Madison, Wisconsin, when their private plane crashed into the icy waters of Lake Monona. Of the 8 people on board, only one survived: Ben Cauley, who later recalled waking up in freezing water holding onto a seat cushion for dear life. The crash claimed the lives of Redding and 4 members of the Bar-Kays: Caldwell Jones, Cunningham, and King. Bassist James Alexander, the other surviving original member, had flown on a different plane due to limited seating. The devastation left the soul and funk communities reeling. Yet rather than dissolve, Alexander and Cauley chose to rebuild the group. They recruited new members and continued performing, backing up Isaac Hayes on his epic Hot Buttered Soul album and reinventing the Bar-Kays' sound for a new era. In the 1970s and 1980s, they re-emerged with a heavier funk and dance style, dropping chart favorites like Shake Your Rump to the Funk and Freak Show on the Dance Floor. Despite their later successes, the memory of the crash lingered like a shadow. Each performance, each groove carried the weight of the friends they had lost in the freezing December skies. The Bar-Kays' story is not just one of tragedy, but of resilience and reinvention, proof that even after devastation, art can find a way to speak louder than silence. James Brown's band. James Brown may have been the godfather of soul, but behind his booming presence stood a group of musicians that forever changed the sound of modern music: his band. This was no ordinary backing group. Known for razor-sharp horns, intricate rhythms, and military-level precision, they laid the groundwork for what we now call funk. It was within this sonic juggernaut that vocal powerhouse Lynn Collins rose, earning the title the Female Preacher. James Brown's band went through multiple incarnations, from the famous Flames in the early 60s to the JBs in the 70s to various offshoots later. Players like Bootsy Collins, Maceo Parker, Fred Wesley, and Clyde Stubblefield would go on to become legends in their own right. But while their grooves inspired generations, their story behind the scenes was rife with tension. Brown's infamously strict leadership style turned rehearsals into grueling marathons. He fined musicians for wrong notes or showing up late, demanded absolute obedience, and rotated members at will. Though this discipline yielded revolutionary music tracks like Get Up, I Feel Like Being a Sex Machine, and The Payback are textbook funk. The toll on his bandmates was enormous. Lynn Collins, who joined Brown's band in the early 1970s, added an electrifying feminine force. Her single, Think About It, produced by Brown, became a feminist funk anthem, and later one of the most sampled songs in hip-hop history. Still, Collins struggled to be taken seriously in her own right. The music industry, dominated by men, frequently sidelined her ambitions. Her attempts to establish a solo career were met with limited support and constant comparisons to Brown. By the mid-70s, many key members had left due to creative disputes and financial grievances. Collins herself eventually departed, never achieving the stardom she deserved. She passed away in 2005 at just 56 from cardiac arrhythmia, a life and voice cut too short. James Brown's band was a revolution wrapped in rhythm. But behind the legacy lies a trail of broken relationships, underappreciated geniuses, and a woman whose fire burned bright, if briefly. Their story remains a reminder that brilliance often comes at a personal cost. The Soul Stirrers. Before rhythm and blues became a commercial genre, gospel was its foundation, and no group embodied that transition more powerfully than the Soul Stirrers. Formed in the 1920s in Texas, the group revolutionized gospel by introducing falsetto leads, complex harmonies, and emotional phrasing. They weren't just singing hymns, they were delivering sermons through song. The lineup changed over time, but the group's golden era came in the 1950s when a teenage Sam Cooke joined as lead vocalist. With his silky tone and impassioned delivery, Cooke transformed traditional spirituals into spiritual experiences. Songs like "Jesus Gave Me Water" and "Touch the Hem of His Garment" captured a raw, sacred intimacy. The group's success helped push gospel into the mainstream and unknowingly laid the groundwork for soul music. In 1960, the Soul Stirrers were dealt a crushing blow when longtime lead singer A.R. Harris died suddenly. The loss left a gaping hole in their sound and spiritual core. Then, in a controversial move, Sam Cooke left the group to pursue a secular career. His departure was both the end of an era and the beginning of another, as Cooke would become a global star and later a tragic figure himself, gunned down in 1964 at age 33. Though the Soul Stirrers continued with new members, the loss of Harris and Cooke was irreversible. The group maintained respect in gospel circles, but the cultural force they once were began to wane. Later members kept the tradition alive, but the innovation, magic, and momentum had largely faded. By the late 20th century, the Soul Stirrers had become more of a historical touchstone than an active musical powerhouse. Their final chapters were marked not by scandal, but by quiet absence reunions that never felt quite the same voices that couldn't replace what was lost. Their story is one of transformation, both musical and emotional. They bridged the sacred and the secular, launching careers and changing lives. But like many pioneers, their greatness was met with grief, and their echoes continue to haunt every note of soul music that followed. The Drifters. Few groups have shaped the sound of early R&B and doo-wop as profoundly as the Drifters, formed in 1953 by Clyde McPhatter. After leaving the Dominoes, the Drifters became pioneers of vocal soul blending, smooth melodies with rich harmonies that would later influence entire generations. But behind the shimmering vocals lay a story of constant upheaval, internal chaos, and a devastating death that nearly derailed their legacy. The Drifters' signature sound didn't come from one set lineup. Instead, the group saw an almost endless rotation of members, some by choice, many due to managerial disputes. In fact, two completely different Drifters groups operated simultaneously during their peak years due to rights ownership battles. Despite this instability, their music soared. They delivered timeless hits like "There Goes My Baby, Save the Last Dance for Me" and "Up on the Roof," working with legendary producers like Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller. In 1964, tragedy struck when lead vocalist Rudy Lewis died suddenly the night before the group was scheduled to record "Under the Boardwalk." Only 27 years old, Lewis was found in his hotel room with causes of death reported as heart failure, though rumors swirled about a possible drug overdose. His loss was especially painful, as Lewis, a gay black man in the 1960s, had fought personal demons in silence while still delivering emotionally stirring performances night after night. Rather than cancel the recording session, management brought in another former lead, Johnny Moore, to step in the very next day, a decision that has since sparked debate over industry coldness versus business necessity. The song became one of their biggest hits, but Lewis's absence haunted those who knew his struggles. Throughout the years, the Drifters became a cautionary tale in the music industry. Incredible success marred by exploitation, internal disputes, and a trail of uncelebrated members. Lawsuits over royalties and touring rights dragged on for decades. While the music lives on, most of the men behind the microphones remain largely unrecognized, despite crafting the very blueprint for modern soul. Today, the Drifters' name is etched in history, but the men who built that name often faded into obscurity or hardship. Their story is not just about harmonies, it's about heartbreak, identity, and the unforgiving machinery of fame. The Marvelettes. Before the Supremes dazzled America, the Marvelettes opened the door for girl groups in the Motown empire. Formed by teenagers from Inkster, Michigan in 1961, this pioneering ensemble gave the label its very first #1 hit with Please, Mr. Postman. The success was groundbreaking. Not only did it put Motown on the national map, but it also proved that young black women could dominate the pop charts. The group's original members, Gladys Horton, Georgia Dobbins, Wanda Young, Georgiana Tillman, and Katherine Anderson, brought youthful charm and unpolished authenticity to their music. With follow-up hits like Playboy Beachwood, 45789, and Don't Mess with Bill, they helped define the sound of early 60s R&B. But while the music soared behind the scenes, the Marvelettes faced mounting obstacles that would eventually destroy their bond and derail their careers. Internal tensions brewed as different members cycled in and out due to illness, personal issues, or clashes with Motown management. Gladys Horton, the charismatic lead voice behind their first hits, became increasingly frustrated with the label's focus shifting toward the Supremes. She left the group in the late 60s, and Wanda Young stepped into the spotlight, though she too would later struggle with vocal issues and personal hardships. Financial exploitation added salt to the wounds. Like many Motown artists, the Marvelettes were underpaid and legally sidelined from their own royalties. Years later, Horton would publicly fight to reclaim her share, stating she had never received a proper cut from their biggest hits. The legal battles dragged on, leaving her disillusioned with the industry she helped shape. After their breakup in 1970, members drifted into anonymity. Horton, despite her role as a trailblazer, lived most of her later years in relative poverty. She passed away in 2011 at the age of 65, still embroiled in royalty disputes. Wanda Young died in 2021 at 78 after battling health problems and fading entirely from public memory. The Marvelettes should have been celebrated as the blueprint for Motown girl groups, but instead they were sidelined, overshadowed, and ultimately forgotten by the very machine they helped launch. Their harmonies were sweet, but their ending was anything but. The Delphonics. Emerging from Philadelphia in the mid-1960s, the Delphonics helped pioneer what would become known as the Philly soul sound, a lush, romantic blend of orchestral instrumentation, falsetto-driven vocals, and poetic lyrics. The trio, originally composed of William Poogie Hart, Wilbert Hart, and Randy Kane, gave the world anthems of love and longing that still resonate today. Their breakthrough came in 1968 with La La Means I Love You, a song that blended simplicity with sincerity and climbed to #4 on the Billboard Hot 100. It became an instant classic, establishing their signature sound, soaring falsettos over symphonic strings. Follow-up hits like Didn't I Blow Your Mind This Time and Ready or Not, Here I Come cemented their place in music history. These tracks didn't just top charts, they shaped the soul genre and became staples in film soundtracks and hip-hop samples for decades to come. But behind the harmonies, tension was brewing. Creative differences and personality clashes began to erode the group's unity. In 1971, Randy Kane abruptly departed, citing personal and professional strain. His exit marked the beginning of the group's unraveling. Though the Delphonics continued recording with replacements, the original chemistry was never fully recovered. Kane lived a relatively quiet life after his departure. But in 2009, he passed away at the age of 63. Reports pointed to health complications, though specifics remained private. The news barely made headlines, a painful reminder of how fleeting recognition can be, even for someone whose voice defined an era. The group's legacy also became clouded by ongoing disputes. Multiple Delphonics groups began touring under the name, leading to confusion and legal battles. William and Wilbert Hart brothers and founding members often found themselves at odds over branding and rights. Though the songs never faded from the public's heart, the men behind them slowly disappeared from view. Their contributions, often overshadowed by more commercially pushed acts, remain essential to the evolution of R&B. The Delphonics made love feel timeless, but their journey proved how quickly harmony can be broken off stage. The Chi-Lites, straight out of Chicago's South Side. The Chi-Lites delivered soul music that was equal parts emotional vulnerability and social consciousness. Formed in the late 1950s, the group solidified its classic lineup in the early 70s with Eugene "Record" Marshall Thompson, Robert "Squirrel" Lester, and Creedle "Red" Jones. They gave voice to longing, heartbreak, and introspection through masterfully crafted songs that spoke directly to the soul. Their biggest breakthrough came in 1971 with the aching ballad "Have You Seen Her?", followed by the unforgettable "Oh Girl", which reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1972. Eugene Records' silky baritone tinged with heartbreak and sincerity was the centerpiece of their sound. Under his leadership, the group tackled both romantic sorrow and societal commentary, carving a distinct lane within soul music. But success didn't come without cost. Creedle Jones, the group's bass vocalist, began struggling with addiction and mental health issues, leading to his departure in the mid-1970s. His absence disrupted the group's stability both musically and emotionally. Jones would later face homelessness, battling personal demons away from the spotlight. He died in 1994 at age 54, a somber end to a man once part of soul's most poignant harmonies. Eugene Record, who had also left the group to pursue a solo career, returned briefly in the 1980s, but never fully regained his footing. He passed away in 2005 at just 64 after a battle with cancer. His death marked the silencing of one of soul's most distinct and expressive voices. Though the Chi-Lites continued to perform in various iterations, led by original member Marshall Thompson, the core that built their musical legacy was irrevocably broken. Behind the slow jams and smooth grooves were lives weathered by hardship, exploitation, and pain rarely acknowledged by the public. The Chi-Lites' records remain timeless, but the toll of fame on their personal lives was steep. Their story stands as a poignant reflection of what happens when the music fades, but the sorrow remains. The 5 Stair Steps, dubbed the first family of soul. The 5 Stair Steps emerged in the late 1960s with a sound that fused pop soul and youthful energy. Formed in Chicago by Clarence Burke Sr., the group consisted of his children Clarence Jr., James, Aloha, Kenneth, and Dennis. Their tight vocal blend and wholesome image quickly caught attention, offering a refreshing, family-centered take on the Motown-era vibe. In 1970, the group reached their peak with the release of OOH Child, a melodic message of hope during a time of political unrest and social change. The song became an anthem, reaching #8 on the Billboard Hot 100. With its memorable refrain, "Things are gonna get easier," it offered comfort to a generation. But internal pressures soon surfaced. As the older siblings matured and their musical tastes evolved, creative differences developed. Clarence Burke Jr., the eldest and most musically inclined, began to assert more control over the group's direction, which caused friction. In the mid-1970s, the original lineup disbanded. Clarence Jr. attempted a solo career and later formed the group The Invisible Man's Band, which had moderate success with the single All Night Thing. Despite his talent, Clarence Jr. struggled to find consistent mainstream success post-Stair Steps. He continued performing and recording independently, but remained largely outside the spotlight. His unexpected death in 2013 at the age of 64 came as a shock to fans. It was later revealed he had been battling health issues, including complications from diabetes. The remaining family members never fully regrouped after Clarence's passing. Though their legacy as child prodigies remains respected, they were often overshadowed by the very industry they helped energize with youthful optimism. OOH Child continues to be covered and sampled, a reminder of their contribution. But their story behind the scenes remains one of quiet heartbreak and unrealized potential. The Emotions. Before Destiny's Child or En Vogue, there were The Emotions, a trio of sisters from Chicago whose harmonies captured both the ecstasy and agony of love. Originally known as the Hutchinson Sunbeams, sisters Wanda Sheila and Jeanette Hutchinson were raised in the church and steeped in gospel tradition. Their transition to secular soul in the late 60s brought a fresh, spiritually rooted sound to the R&B scene. Their big break came in 1977 with Best of My Love, a disco-infused hit produced by Maurice White of Earth, Wind and Fire. The single soared to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and R&B charts, earning them a Grammy and solidifying their place in musical history. Other standout tracks like I Don't Want to Lose Your Love and Flowers followed, showcasing their vocal chemistry and emotional depth. But fame didn't shield them from tragedy. Their father, Joe Hutchinson, who served as both manager and mentor, passed away suddenly during the height of their success. His death devastated the group personally and professionally. Without his guidance, the sisters struggled with industry politics and dwindling label support. Internal dynamics also began to shift, and Sheila eventually stepped away from touring, leading to performance substitutions that impacted their cohesiveness. Although the Emotions continued recording through the 1980s, and occasionally collaborated with Earth, Wind and Fire, they never recaptured the magic of their Best of My Love era. Jeanette battled health challenges in later years, while Wanda, once the lead voice of their biggest hits, retreated from the spotlight entirely. Despite appearing on nostalgic tours and receiving accolades for their contributions to R&B, their momentum had long faded. They remained respected but underappreciated, even as their songs lived on through samples and covers by hip-hop and pop artists. The Emotions gave voice to love in all its forms, but offstage they navigated grief, industry fatigue, and personal sacrifice. Their harmonies were heavenly, but their journey was earthbound, marked by pain, persistence, and the bittersweet ache of what could have been. The Main Ingredient. The Main Ingredient began their journey in Harlem during the early 1960s, initially performing under the name The Poets, before evolving into The Main Ingredient by 1967. The original trio, Donald McPherson, Luther Simmons Jr., and Tony Sylvester, crafted a smooth blend of soul pop and Latin-tinged arrangements. Their sophisticated sound and relatable lyrics struck a chord with urban audiences navigating love and life in a turbulent era. Their ascent began with regional singles and moderate charting songs, but their defining moment came with Everybody Plays the Fool in 1972. Driven by Donald McPherson's soulful, pleading vocals, the track became a crossover smash, reaching #3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and #2 on the R&B chart. Its clever lyricism and lush orchestration made it an instant classic, an anthem for the romantically wounded. But just as the group was poised to ride the wave of national success, tragedy struck. In July 1971, Donald McPherson was diagnosed with leukemia. Despite aggressive treatment, he died suddenly that same year at just 29. His death came before the release of Everybody Plays the Fool, denying him the chance to witness the full impact of the group's biggest hit. Cuba Gooding Sr. stepped in to replace McPherson, helping the group carry on with additional hits like Just Don't Want to Be Lonely and Rolling Down a Mountainside. While Gooding brought his own charisma, the shadow of McPherson's absence was inescapable. His loss permanently altered the emotional foundation of the group. Throughout the late 1970s and early 80s, the Main Ingredient struggled to maintain commercial momentum. Internal changes and shifts in the music industry left them drifting. Though they reunited several times, they never fully regained their earlier magic. In 2017, Cuba Gooding Sr. was found dead in his car in Los Angeles, reportedly from a drug-related incident. The group had lost yet another voice that had once defined their sound. For a band that had only just begun to climb, the main ingredient story remains one of unrealized potential and the cruel timing of fate. The Spinners. The Spinners, also known as the Detroit Spinners in the UK, began their journey in 1954 in Ferndale, Michigan. Their road to stardom was anything but immediate. Though they signed with Motown in the 1960s, they spent years in the background, often overshadowed by more heavily promoted acts. But when they teamed up with Philadelphia producer Tom Bell in the early 1970s, their fortunes changed dramatically. Bell helped craft a new, refined sound that blended lush orchestration with tightly woven harmonies. The result was a string of hits that defined the Philly soul era: I'll Be Around, Could It Be, I'm Falling in Love, One of a Kind, Love Affair, and Then Came You. A duet with Dionne Warwick that topped the Billboard Hot 100 in 1974. The group's gentle romanticism and vocal precision made them one of the most consistent acts of the decade. Yet behind the velvet harmonies, the group endured deep losses. One of the most significant was the departure and subsequent death of original member Philippe Wynne, a charismatic lead vocalist who brought soul and theatrics to their live shows. After leaving the Spinners in 1977 to pursue a solo career, Wynne died of a heart attack in 1984 while performing on stage, literally singing until the end. His death was a gut punch for fans and former bandmates alike. In 2004, co-founder Billy Henderson died after a long battle with diabetes, and in 2008, bass singer Purvis Jackson passed away due to brain and liver cancer. Their deaths, while less publicized, marked the end of an era. Despite rotating lineups, the Spinners continued to perform, earning accolades and induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2023. But few from the original lineup lived to see that long overdue recognition. The Spinners' journey reflects the bittersweet fate of many soul pioneers, decades of hits, decades of being overlooked, and a legacy finally honored when most of the voices that built it were already gone. Their sound may have been gentle, but their story hits hard. The Manhattans, formed in Jersey City, New Jersey in 1962. The Manhattans combined old-school doo-wop stylings with modern R&B sensibilities to create a distinctive velvet smooth soul sound. The original lineup, George Smitty Smith, Winfred Blue, Lovett, Edward Sonny Bivens, Kenneth Wally Kelly, and Richard Ricky Taylor, quickly built a name through passionate ballads that touched on heartbreak, devotion, and the complexities of love. Their rise was steady through the late 60s, but the 1970s brought them mainstream acclaim. Their biggest commercial success came in 1976 with Kiss and Say Goodbye, written by Blue Lovett and led vocally by Gerald Alston, who joined in the early 70s. The song topped both the Billboard Hot 100 and R&B charts, becoming an enduring classic for weddings, slow dances, and breakups alike. However, the group's success was punctured by tragedy when George Smitty Smith, one of the founding vocalists, was diagnosed with a brain tumor. In December 1970, Smith passed away before the group's breakout moment, robbing him of the chance to witness their ascent into soul royalty. His death devastated the band emotionally, though they pressed on out of respect for the legacy they had all built together. The Manhattans continued to chart through the late 70s and early 80s with songs like Shining Star and There's No Me Without You. But as trends shifted and members' aged, departures became inevitable. Blue Lovett retired from touring due to health problems and passed away in 2014. Wally Kelly died in 2015. Each passing felt like the dimming of a once blazing constellation of soul. Despite multiple lineups and reunion tours, the group's core essence faded with each member lost. Their legacy lives in countless love songs and dedications across decades, but the original voices behind the mic, many are now quiet, remembered only by those who truly listened. The Persuasions. The Persuasions were never about flash. They were about feeling. Born out of Brooklyn street corners in the early 1960s, The group Jerry Lawson, Jimmy Hayes, Joe, Jesse, Russell, J. Otis Washington, and Herbert Tubo Road crafted a cappella harmonies so rich they made full bands seem optional. No drums, no guitars, just voices that echoed gospel, soul, and doo-wop with emotional honesty that was impossible to ignore. Their big break came thanks to none other than Frank Zappa, who heard their demo over the phone and signed them to his label. In 1970, the Persuasions released a cappella followed by We Came to Play and their iconic Street Corner Symphony. They weren't just preserving an old tradition, they were revitalizing it. Songs like Buffalo Soldier People Get Ready, and later their reinterpretation of the Beatles' catalog, set them apart as innovators in vocal music. But as time passed, the group's internal dynamics changed. Decades of touring took a toll. Then, in 1988, tragedy struck when bass vocalist Herbert Road collapsed and died suddenly while on tour in Switzerland. His death stunned both fans and fellow members. Without his deep foundation, the group's sound was never quite the same. In 2003, Jerry Lawson, lead singer and arranger, departed after over 40 years with the group. His voice had been the soul of the Persuasions, and his absence marked the start of a slow fade. Though the remaining members continued under the name and collaborated with newer artists, the emotional resonance of the original lineup became a memory rather than a living presence. Jimmy Hayes, the beloved bass man who had filled stadiums with the lowest of low notes, passed away in 2017. With each member lost a layer of the Persuasions' harmonic tapestry unraveled. Their story is one of passion, purity, and pain, a group that built everything with nothing but human voices, only to watch time and death silence their most vital instruments. The music remains, but the choir has dwindled. The Stylistics, hailing from Philadelphia and formed in 1968. The Stylistics became synonymous with silken falsettos, lush orchestration, and elegant heartbreak. Comprised initially of Russell Tompkins Jr., Arian Love, Herb Merle, James Smith, and James Dunn, the group emerged from the merger of two local bands, the Percussions and the Monarchs. Together, they built one of the most distinctive sounds of the 1970s. Their early success was driven by a partnership with producer Tom Bell and lyricist Linda Creed, whose sophisticated arrangements transformed the Stylistics into chart royalty. Tracks like You Are Everything Betcha by Golly Wow, I'm Stone in Love with You, and Break Up to Make Up became timeless staples of Quiet Storm R&B radio. Their refined image and emotionally vulnerable lyrics stood in contrast to the gritty funk of their contemporaries. But beneath the smooth sound, cracks began to form. As the group's fame grew, creative tensions and management decisions led to a separation from Bell after their third album, causing a decline in both musical direction and commercial success. Despite touring and recording throughout the late 70s and 80s, they never quite reclaimed their early magic. The most devastating blow came in the early 2000s when Russell Tompkins Jr., the group's iconic falsetto lead, began experiencing serious vocal strain and health issues. His distinctive voice, central to their sound, could no longer carry the emotional weight of their catalog. In 2000, he officially left the group, marking the end of an era. Without him, the Stylistics became a name more than a force, continuing to perform with new vocalists, but lacking the soul-stirring brilliance of their original frontman. While Tompkins later formed his own version of the group Russell Tompkins Jr. and the new Stylistics, the original lineup never fully reunited. Over the years, members like James Smith and James Dunn also passed away quietly, with little fanfare, their contributions often overlooked. For a group that sang about love's sweetness and sorrow so perfectly, their own ending feels hauntingly appropriate. A beautiful voice that slowly faded into silence. The Temprees. Emerging from Memphis in the late 1960s, the Temprees were a trio that brought a distinct, polished brand of soul rooted in Southern romance. Originally consisting of Jasper Jabbo Phillips, Harold Scotty Scott, and Del Juan Del Calvin, the group was signed to the legendary Stax Records subsidiary We Produce, which specialized in smooth orchestrated soul. The Temprees stood apart for their impeccable vocal harmony and lavish string arrangements, often compared to the Delphonics and the Stylistics, but with a Memphis twist. Their biggest hit, dedicated to the one I love, became an anthem of tender devotion and climbed the R&B charts in the early 1970s. Other favorites included Love, Can Be So Wonderful, and Explain It to Her Mama, further establishing them as masters of romantic soul balladry. Though they never achieved mainstream pop stardom, they developed a cult following among soul enthusiasts and were beloved in the Southern circuit. Their youthful sincerity and orchestral sound gave their music a timeless, cinematic quality. But that cinematic dream came to an abrupt and violent end. In 2001, Jasper Jabbo Phillips, the group's charismatic frontman, was shot and killed in a robbery gone wrong. His death at just 52 not only devastated his bandmates and fans, but also marked the tragic end of the Temprees as a creative force. Phillips was the vocal and emotional center of the trio. Without him, the group's energy and identity were irreparably broken. In the years since surviving, members have made occasional appearances and continued to honor their roots, but the pain of Phillips's murder lingers heavily. His voice, which once soared with innocence and soul, was silenced by senseless violence, another life lost too soon in a community already burdened by tragedy. The Temprees story reminds us that not every musical ending is faded by time. Some are ripped away in an instant, leaving only echoes of what once was. The Moments. Emerging in the late 1960s, out of Washington, D.C., and later settling in New Jersey, The Moments became known for crafting tender, slow jams that captured the highs and lows of black romance with heartfelt vulnerability. The original lineup, Mark Green, Eric Olfus Sr., and Richard Gross, helped set the tone for the love ballad movement in soul, laying the groundwork for groups like Levert and New Edition. Their big breakthrough came with the 1970 hit Love on a Two-Way Street, a soulful lament about heartbreak and disillusionment. It soared to number 1 on the Billboard R&B chart and peaked at number 3 on the Hot 100. That song, among others like Sexy Mama and Look at Me, I'm in Love, cemented their reputation for crafting timeless love anthems. But behind the scenes, turmoil was brewing. In the mid-1970s, the group became embroiled in a legal and branding dispute with their record label, All Platinum Records. The company claimed ownership of the Moments name, forcing the band to change their identity. In 1978, they rebranded as Ray Goodman and Brown, named after members Harry Ray, Al Goodman, and Billy Brown. Though the group enjoyed continued success under the new moniker, with the hit Special Lady marking a major comeback, this name change confused fans and fractured the group's public image. The group endured another devastating blow in 1992 when Harry Ray passed away from a stroke at just 45. His rich, expressive baritone had been a defining element of their sound. Though the group carried on, often reuniting for nostalgic tours, they never again reached the emotional or commercial heights of their early years. Their catalog has since been sampled by numerous hip-hop and R&B artists, a testament to their enduring influence. But the Moments themselves often go uncredited, overshadowed by the legal complexities that obscured their legacy. Their story is a classic case of talent caught in a web of industry politics where name rights contracts and ownership disputes buried the recognition they truly deserved. The O'Jays, hailing from Canton, Ohio. The O'Jays began their career in the late 1950s as the Triumphs, then the Mascots, before finally adopting their iconic name in honor of Cleveland DJ Eddie O'Jay. The original lineup included Eddie Levert, Walter Williams, William Powell, Bobby Massey, and Bill Isles. Their early years were marked by regional popularity, but true stardom arrived in the 1970s when they teamed up with Philadelphia International Records and legendary producers Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff. This partnership yielded an unprecedented run of socially conscious, funk-infused soul hits. Songs like Backstabbers, For the Love of Money, and the iconic Love Train not only topped charts but also tackled issues like greed, betrayal, and black unity. The OJs became known for their electrifying harmonies and emotionally resonant storytelling music with a message wrapped in rhythm. But even at the peak of their powers, tragedy struck. In 1977, original member William Powell was diagnosed with cancer and passed away at just 35 years old. His death was a crushing blow to the group. Powell had been an essential part of their vocal symmetry, and his presence both on stage and off left a void that could never fully be filled. Over the years, other founding members also faded from the spotlight. Bill Iles died in 2019, and Bobby Massey, who had left before their commercial breakthrough, remained largely unsung despite his early contributions. While Eddie Levert and Walter Williams continued performing well into the 2000s, they too faced personal struggles. Levert lost two of his sons, Gerald and Sean Levert, both successful R&B singers, to sudden deaths in their 30s and 40s, adding another layer of personal heartbreak to the group's legacy. Despite their trials, the OJs were finally inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2005. Yet the honor arrived after so many of their original members had already passed their voices, absent from the stage they helped build. The OJ's story is one of vision and victory, but also of grief and goodbye, a brotherhood tested by fate, yet held together by harmony that still echoes across generations. The Dells, formed in Harvey, Illinois in 1952. The Dells are one of the longest-running vocal groups in music history. Their longevity was almost mythic. Same members for over 40 years, navigating the ever-shifting currents of doo-wop soul and R&B without losing their core identity. With lead singer Marvin Jr.'s booming baritone and Johnny Carter's smooth tenor falsetto, their vocal interplay became their trademark. Their early success came with the 1956 single "Oh What a Night," which would become their signature hit, and one they re-recorded in 1969 to even greater acclaim. That version reached number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 on the R&B chart, showcasing their ability to adapt to modern soul while staying true to their roots. Other classics included "Stay in My Corner," "Give Your Baby a Standing Ovation," and "The Love We Had Stays on My Mind." The Dells never broke up something virtually unheard of in the music industry. But behind the tight harmonies were personal sacrifices, unrelenting tour schedules, and aging bodies. In 2004, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, finally receiving mainstream acknowledgement for their remarkable consistency. Then in 2009, tenor Johnny Carter passed away from cancer. Just 4 years later, in 2013, Marvin Jr., the irreplaceable vocal engine of the group, died from complications related to heart and kidney disease. His death marked the end of the Dells' unmatched 6-decade run. Though surviving members occasionally performed tributes, the group quietly retired. The Dells didn't fall apart, they faded with grace as time slowly silenced the voices that had harmonized through generations. Their story isn't just rare, it's sacred. A legacy of loyalty, craft, and soulful storytelling wrapped in an ending as gentle and tragic as the love songs they once sang. The Impressions. The Impressions were more than just a soul group, they were a voice for the civil rights era. Formed in 1958 in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and later based in Chicago, the group's original lineup featured Jerry Butler, Curtis Mayfield, and Sam Gooden. Their music spoke to the moral and spiritual heart of a generation in flux. Under Curtis Mayfield's leadership, the Impressions recorded socially charged anthems that elevated soul music beyond romance and dance. Tracks like "People Get Ready," "Keep on Pushing," and "We're a Winner" became soundtracks to the Black freedom struggle. With soaring gospel-inspired harmonies and Mayfield's aching falsetto, the group embodied Black pride, resilience, and hope. When Mayfield left in 1970 to launch a solo career, many expected the Impressions to collapse. But Sam Gooden and Fred Cash carried the torch, bringing in new vocalists and continuing to record and tour. Though their popularity dimmed without Mayfield's pen, they retained deep respect among musicians and civil rights leaders alike. Tragedy returned in 1990, when original member Arthur Brooks passed away. Still, the group pressed on, performing well into the 2000s. Then, in August 2022, Sam Gooden, the last surviving original member, died at the age of 87. His passing marked the end of a living connection to the golden era of protest soul. Unlike many of their peers, the Impressions didn't end in scandal or internal collapse. Their tragedy is quieter, a slow fade into history. Their profound influence often undercredited in mainstream retrospectives. Yet their message remains etched in time, unity, dignity, and the enduring fight for justice. The Isley Brothers. When the Isley Brothers began in Cincinnati in 1954, they were just a gospel group of teenage siblings with big dreams. Over time, they evolved into a powerhouse spanning doo-wop, soul, funk, rock, and R&B, one of the few groups to reinvent themselves every decade while still sounding timeless. Their early success came with Shout in 1959, followed by hits like Twist and Shout. But it wasn't until the 1970s that the group found their defining era. With younger brothers Ernie and Marvin Isley and brother-in-law Chris Jasper joining the classic trio of Ronald Rudolph and O'Kelly Isley, the group exploded with hits like It's Your Thing, That Lady Between the Sheets, and For the Love of You. Their ability to fuse funk grooves with romantic slow jams made them generational icons. However, the band's remarkable trajectory was hit with devastating losses. In 1986, O'Kelly Isley died from a heart attack at just 48. His death marked the first major fracture in a group known for its family unity. In 2010, Marvin Isley, a key architect of their funk era, died from complications related to diabetes after suffering amputations and years of health decline. Despite these tragedies, Ronald Isley kept the Isley name alive, continuing to perform into his 80s. Yet behind-the-curtain lawsuits between siblings over naming rights royalties and management of the brand exposed cracks in the once unshakable family unit. The Isley Brothers' journey is a study in brilliance marred by grief. They left an unparalleled musical legacy spanning nearly 70 years, but the price of that longevity was heartbreak, both personal and professional. From church choirs to concert arenas, their music endures. But many of the brothers who built that empire now rest in silence. And there you have it, 20 iconic black bands whose tragic endings often go untold. Behind the harmonies and hit records were real lives marked by loss, injustice, and forgotten legacies. At Legends of Black Excellence, we believe these stories deserve to be remembered just as much as the music. Which band's story moved you the most? Were there any that surprised you, or someone we should have included? Drop your thoughts in the comments and join the conversation. Let's keep their legacies alive, not just in playlists, but in the history books where they belong.